I'm very happy to share our work today with you all. Where are we on cyber, which is a qualitative study on board cybersecurity risk decision making. I'm Jens Christian Optemuth, and together with my colleagues, Jonas Hielscher, which is a freshly baked new PhD, and my professor Angela Sasse, we did this project. We are part of a very big team over in Bochum, Germany, and we are different kinds of researchers from different fields, from psychology, anthropology, more technical fields such as cybersecurity and computer science, where Jonas and I am from. And before we start digging into the paper, I want to get us all up to speed and on the same page. So I've got a little what is a board in the UK, even because we did our study in the UK. And it's kind of special over there because the board, and when I say the board, I always mean the board of directors within my presentation, consists there of both executives and non-executives, which is normally, or in other fields of the word, heavily split. So executives, for example, the chief executive, chief financial officer, chief technical officer, chief information officer, and non-executive directors, which are normally executives at different kind of companies or retired executives, so more seasoned executives that are not part of the company itself, but are brought in to get an outside perspective, for example. And please note that I did not put a chief informational security officer on the slide right here, because normally they are not part of this hierarchy, but rather one or two levels further down below in such companies. So they are reporting, depending on the company, either to the chief financial officer, chief technical officer, chief information officer. All right, so why should we care about boards? Why should we look at boards from a cybersecurity perspective? So first of all, boards have an oversight role. Yeah, they have to have a long-term view on emerging risks for a company, including cybersecurity risks. Then non-executive directors, which in the UK are part with the executives together at the board, are tasked with maximizing shareholder value. And cybersecurity can harm stock prices because cybersecurity disclosures can harm stock prices. So now that we know we maybe should take a look at boards, what did we ask ourselves? First of all, how does cybersecurity risk decision making of boards even work? Yeah, it's a heavily understudied field right now, and we want to understand the information flow towards the board, the type and content of their decision, and how they are then executed. And second of all, we wanted to know how do other stakeholders influence those decisions. Yeah, so for example, CISOs, executives, regulators, investors, and so on. How did we do that? First, we did some exploratory interviews with 6 participants, which were our pilots. They were CISOs or non-executive directors or consultants. And with those, we created an interview guide for each of these groups. And then we recruited C-level executives, non-executive directors, CISOs, and C-level consultants for 18 semi-structured interviews. This we then inductively and deductively qualitatively coded and derived key topics and learnings from that. So about the recruitment part, because that's kind of interesting. Yeah, how did we get access to those people? For the pilots, we first used a research project which was partially funded by the National Cybersecurity Centre of the UK, and they had an advisory board. And attending this advisory board, there were some non-executive directors and CISOs, and these, through their peers and contacts, then led to snowballing, and through the snowballing approach, we reached 18 further people in the end, which were part of our interview study. Sadly, only 2 of those were female. Most of them were executives at their main job, yeah, so very important here, all of these executives besides one, actually were non-executive directors and serving at boards and other companies as well. Then we had very different, many different industries, so we had a rather broad look and not only technology industry. And one very outstanding thing, in my opinion, is that we really reached very, very large companies here. Yeah, we've got companies up to 260,000 employees and averaging around 90,000 employees, and those minimal value there of 5,000 is due to the consultants we also included in our research, which their consultancy agency themselves just had not that many employees, but they were consulting like on the top level. So, enough of the background. Let's go for the results. As boards have an oversight role, they have to ask the right questions, yeah? But these questions sadly remained very, very abstract, what our participants reported us. One example right here from a CISO is they were, well, challenged by being asked, are we giving you enough money? That's not really challenging, is it? So there's a lack of depth of those questions, so there's no real challenging going on for such technology. And even worse, some of these executives actually told us that they are not really being challenged at the board because some of the non-executives and other executives are just scared about losing face. Yeah? They don't want to ask questions that might make them look stupid in the end. So they are scared that it's technology, it's dark art, it's a bunch of chaps in hoodies, as our executive right here put it. Then he found out that regulation really helps elevating the profile of cybersecurity at the board level. So it helps bring the topic to the board, but our participants also wished for way more knowledge sharing by regulatory bodies, as they are a point of contact in crisis situations, for example, or at least they have to, if there is an incident, they get the reports, and that could be like anonymized and shared later on. Then we found very different risk perceptions between board level executives and CISOs. So if both of them were talking about risks, they were talking about completely different risks. Boards were talking about financial risks, while CISOs, for example, were talking about more technical risks. And as one executive put it right here, if you've got a conversation where someone is talking about antivirus tools on a board level, you've got a problem, because that's not something that should be discussed on a board level. That's way too technical. But we also found a promising way of bridging the gap right there. So this cybersecurity risks a CISO is seen from a more technical perspective needs to be somehow translated. And one of the CISOs actually described us an approach that worked really well for them, where they prepare the material for their chief finance officer, and this one would then present it to the board. Since the CFO is not an IT person, they had to first figure out what really is the stuff they want to present at the board level. So they really had to collaboratively work together to find the bits and pieces that were really worth well presenting to the board, and removing all the IT and DT world and concepts out of it, as the CISO put it. Then we found that even if the board is talking about cybersecurity risks, those are normally not directly compared to more traditional risk management approaches that are there for many, many years. So cybersecurity and many other operational risks just are looked at in a vacuum and not really compared to other risks. And in the end, cybersecurity risks are just one of many, many risks a company is facing. And for our second research questions, we thought in the beginning that investors would have maybe a demand for cybersecurity, as they want to invest in the company that hopefully not gets hacked in the next few months. But this was not really the case. Almost all non-executive directors were just telling us, yeah, I've never heard a question about cybersecurity when attending investor presentations, or I would be amazed if an investor even asked questions about cybersecurity, or would a serious investor even ask such a thing. Which puts boards in a kind of awkward position, right? Because on the one hand, they have to, they are the ones representing the shareholders' interests, and on the other hand, they have this oversight role where they have to try to keep the company running on the long term and not on the next 2 years, right? So what can we do better? First of all, bridging the gap between CISOs and NET's language, yeah? In the short term, that might work through executives stepping in and trying to help translate. in the long run, we see way more promise in building subcommittees designated to discuss and translate these things, because otherwise the CISOs would still not really get challenged, and they have like a big power imbalance. They are the highest ranking person in cybersecurity in this company, and they could actually decide what to share with board members and what not to share, right? So we really propose this idea of building more subcommittees where CISOs, executives, and non-executives get together and bridge the gap from both sides. And yeah, what's next? Future work. Study more cybersecurity at boards. Even though they are hard to recruit, as I've said, we found a promising way to actually recruit them, which is surely applicable for other countries as well, since we only studied the UK right here. And leveraging, risk management approaches that are way more mature and out there for a way longer time would be also a very, very interesting field. And we found some evidence within our study that market and credit risk might be a fit. So if someone's interested in that, yeah, please go for that. So that's all from my side. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
So yeah, any questions? Okay, while we come across the first question, I have one. So you mentioned about the different members of the board, right? Mm-hmm. Did you also evaluate their technical background or kind of experience with cybersecurity?
Yeah, most of them had no really direct experiences. Currently, there's a push for demanding CISOs to be part of the board or attending other boards. So there is some expertise getting put in there from the outside. But yeah, currently, as I put it right there, most of them are rather embarrassed to ask about cybersecurity or even technical questions because they don't want to lose face and look stupid or something like that.
Yeah, and another thing is they also mentioned in the investors meeting or something like that, they never ask about cybersecurity. Did they somehow see any change after any policy implementation, like it's not really cybersecurity, but privacy policy implementation? Any questions about that, hey, we need to work on this area or something like that?
Not that we know of. Our participants really did not see this as a thing that an investor would ask. So all of them were, ooh, that's interesting. Now that you even say that to me, I'm surprised that nobody asked yet, but nobody did ask so far, so no.
Great, thank you again. And as I mentioned, like it's very difficult to comprehend all of the work in 10 minutes or 12 minutes of the presentation. So feel free to ask more questions offline, and we have lunch after this, so definitely. But before lunch, thank you again. Let's give a...